Welcome back to the deep dive. This is where we take, the heaviest, most intricate stack of source material, all the history, the philosophy, the linguistics, and we try to synthesize it into knowledge that really sticks.
Yeah, that's the goal.
You came to us wanting a masterclass in the absolute foundation of theological belief, and well, that's exactly what we're delivering today. We are going deep. A profound exploration of the fundamental concept of al-Rab.
Which is usually translated as the Lord.
Right, the Lord. And flowing from that, the core theological doctrine, توحيد الربوبية, the monotheism of lordship. Now, this is dense, critical material, but our goal is to show you not just what this concept is, but why it is really the gateway to understanding faith itself.
That's right. And this deep dive is it's very focused. Our mission is sort of threefold. First, we really need to analyze the linguistic DNA of the word Lord to understand its exclusivity. It's not just a simple title. Second, we're going to review the incredibly rich and diverse evidence that's used to establish the Creator's unique existence and his role in the universe. I mean, we're talking proofs that range from the deepest part of the human soul to the furthest star in the cosmos.
Wow.
And then, most crucially, we have to use our sources to determine with absolute clarity why historical and theological consensus says that just acknowledging that the Creator exists isn't enough. It's insufficient for true belief.
And the sources we've pulled from are exactly what you need for this. We have classical and contemporary theological texts, works that give you that rigorous linguistic analysis, and they blend a scriptural authority with some really powerful philosophical argumentation. So our job here is to structure all of those insights so you, the learner, can step away with a profound, really usable comprehension of what divine lordship truly entails.
Okay, so let's unpack that word immediately, al-Rab. When we say Lord in English, I think we often think of, a feudal noble or some kind of authoritative figure.
Yeah, a landowner or something. Exactly.
Yeah.
But our sources emphasize that the Arabic term it's far more dynamic. It's way more comprehensive. So what are the layers of meaning that are embedded in this single word?
The word Rab is profoundly complex. Linguistically, it's an active participle, which implies a continuous active role. It's not a static title. It's one who acts as a master, trainer, or sustainer.
Always in action.
Always. And the sources trace its essence back to three fundamental interconnected linguistic roots. You really have to understand all three of them to grasp the theological weight of the term.
Okay, let's break them down then. Let's do the three roots. Where should we start? Maybe with the most practical one, the one that's easiest to visualize.
For sure. The first root means the owner or master, al-Malik wa al-Sahib. This is it's the concept of proprietary ownership and possession.
Okay, so just like, I own this house, that kind of thing.
Exactly like that. The one who holds the title, the dominion, the authority over a thing. And this usage is common in day-to-day life. Our texts cite a great practical example from the time of the prophet, and it's about property law.
Okay.
If a person finds a lost camel, the instruction was that they should leave it untouched, recognizing the rightful proprietor, until its rabbit's owner finds it.
So rab there just means owner. Simple.
Simple as that. This root immediately establishes that core concept of dominion over possessions.
That's clear. Ownership. But rab isn't just a title of ownership, is it? It implies a relationship of authority and obedience, which that sounds like it must be the second root.
That's exactly where it goes. The second root brings in the meaning of the obeyed leader or sovereign as Sayyid al-Muta. This goes way beyond just holding the deed to something.
Right.
It denotes executive authority, leadership, the power to command obedience. It's the status of a revered chief or a figure who is owed deference within a domain. We see this historical usage very clearly in classical Arabic poetry.
You have an example for us.
Yeah, the sources cite the poet Labaid bin Rabia al-Miri, where referring to someone as the Rab of Kinda meant they were the unquestioned and obeyed master, the ultimate authority figure of that specific tribe.
So if the first root is about holding the title, the second is about actively exercising the authority that title gives you.
Perfect.
Yeah.
And the sources also mention a powerful, almost chilling contextual example that's related to this root, and it's all about the disruption of that authority.
Ah, okay.
That example is essential because it really illustrates the social weight of the word Rab. It's the prophetic saying about the signs of the hour, which foretells this great reversal of societal norms.
Oh, right.
That the slave woman will give birth to her Rab, her master, her lord.
Wow.
So here Rab signifies the sovereign master whom the slave is obligated to obey. It's this powerful illustration of social upheaval, where the natural order of hierarchy is just completely inverted, and the offspring becomes the ultimate authority figure over its own mother.
That is a remarkable way to illustrate sovereignty and command. Okay, so that's two. Now, the third root seems to be the one that really encapsulates the divine meaning most comprehensively.
It's the most encompassing, for sure. The third root relates to the reformer, sustainer, or trainer, al-musli or at-tarbiyah. And it's derived from the word tarbiyah, which is, it's so much richer than just simple sustenance.
It's not just about providing food?
Not at all. It means to bring a thing gradually, progressively, to a state of completion, soundness, and perfection. It implies this constant ongoing care, administration, nurturing, and refinement until the object reaches its perfect intended state.
So if we combine these three roots then, you have ownership, you have sovereignty, and then this constant sustenance toward perfection. The concept of Rab becomes immensely profound.
It does.
It's not just a creator who makes something and then, walks away. It's an active, present, governing force.
Precisely. And this is where the linguistic boundary marker comes in, which is absolutely critical for you, the learner, to grasp. While the word Rab can be applied to a creature, the master of the house, Rab-ad-dar, the owner of a field, the chief of a tribe, it must always be qualified.
Yeah.
It has to be added to something specific and limited.
Meaning you can say Lord of X, like Lord of the Manor, but you can't just walk up to a human being and say, you are the Lord, not in an unqualified sense.
Exactly. When the word is used generically, defined by that definite article, also al-Rab, or when it's used absolutely, without any qualification or addition, it refers exclusively, universally, and only to God.
Ah.
When you say al-Rab, you are invoking the one who is the absolute owner of everything, the sovereign over everything, and the sustainer of everything. That comprehensiveness is just. It's implied in the term itself.
It sounds like a built-in linguistic mechanism to prevent confusion or to stop the unwarranted elevation of a created thing.
It is. And the sources reinforce this separation with related terminology. The source noun Rububiyah is reserved for God's lordship.
Okay.
Whereas Rabia is the term used for human upkeep and training, like the upbringing of children. This linguistic separation confirms the absolute uniqueness of the divine lordship, and it ensures that when the term is used in its absolute sense, it implies complete singular control over existence itself.
Okay, so if those linguistic roots establish the meaning of the Lord, what does the core theological concept, Tawhid al-Rububiyya, the monotheism of lordship, what does that formally mean in terms of practical belief? How do our sources define this foundational idea?
Tawhid al-Rububiyya it's defined as the firm, unwavering conviction that God is the sole Lord, the Rab,
The sole one.
the exclusive owner, creator, controller, and planner of absolutely everything in existence. It is a declaration of absolute singularity in governance.
No partners, no committee meetings.
No committee meetings. The sources really emphasize that this conviction means he has absolutely no partner in dominion, no aid against humiliation, no rival who can oppose him, and nothing. Absolutely nothing can reverse his command or interfere with his overarching plans. It's a total declaration of singular, independent, and comprehensive control over the entire universe, both seen and unseen.
I mean, that's a concept of totalizing power and authority. For you, the learner, it probably helps to break this down into components. This unity of lordship must manifest through specific actions that only he can perform, right? What are the core exclusive attributes that define this divine dominion?
The sources outline 7 major interconnected actions and characteristics that are exclusive to God's lordship. They basically form the framework of Rububiyah.
Okay, 7. Let's start at the beginning, the act that, sets the stage for everything else.
Number 1 is creation, origination, and shaping. He is Al-Khaliq, the creator, Al-Bari, the originator, and Al-Musawwir, the fashioner. He brings things into being from absolutely nothing, he forms them, and he decides their ultimate structure and form.
And if we just pause on that for a second, the implication is profound, isn't it? I mean, if there were 2 creators...
Well, their will, their power, their methods would inevitably clash. You'd have chaos in the cosmos. The perfect order we see necessitates a single originator. So no creator exists besides him, period.
Okay. And once that reality is created, it must inherently belong to the one who made it.
That leads directly to number 2, ownership and kingship, Al-Malik. He owns the heavens, the earth, and everything in between. And this is not passive ownership like a deed in a safe deposit box.
Right.
It is active kingship, Malakat. He is the sovereign and the source of all authority. Believing in this means acknowledging that any possession or authority held by a creature is just. It's temporary, it's borrowed, and it's fundamentally owned by the ultimate king.
Next comes the continuous support system that's required to keep this massive operation running.
Number 3, sustaining, al-Razak. He is the exclusive provider of provision or risk. And the sources stress that he provides sustenance not just for us, for humans, but for every single creature.
Every single one.
From the microscopic to the gigantic. He sends provision from the sky, the rain, and causes it to spring forth from the earth, the crops. If you truly grasp this, it should remove that deep-seated anxiety so many of us feel about earning a living. I mean, if God has guaranteed the provision for an ant in a dark hole, how could he possibly neglect the human he created and commanded? This attribute links back perfectly to that tarbiyah root we talked about, the continuous benevolent nurturing.
Okay, so numbers 4 and 5, they describe the decisive control over our fundamental state of being.
Indeed. Number 4 is life and death, al-muhi wal-mumit. He alone creates life and death, and he does it to test humanity. As the source quotes, he is the one who created death and life to test you as to which of you is best indeed.
And that's an absolute power. It can't be delegated.
Can't be. And it's the ultimate reminder of accountability, because our lives aren't really our own. They are granted by the muhi, the giver of life, and they are recalled by the mubi, the taker of life.
And number 5 is the totality of decisive control over, fortune and destiny.
That is giving and withholding, al-muti wal-mani. This is the power to grant favor or to prevent affliction. If he chooses to open a door of mercy for you, no one in creation can close it or withhold it. And if he withholds something, no one can release it after him.
This isn't a shared responsibility.
Not at all. The sources cite a really profound example of this recognition, this singular control. In the prophet's prayer after Salat, "O God, there is none to prevent what you give and none to give what you prevent." That single phrase just encapsulates the totality of control. Everything good and everything restrictive comes from him alone.
And so 6 and 7, they deal with the continuous governance of the cosmos, the ongoing operation of the universe.
Exactly. Number 6 is regulation and administration at Tadbir. He directs the affairs of the entire universe. He distinguishes the signs, governs the movement of celestial bodies, manages the intricate cycle of nature. The cosmos doesn't just run on autopilot.
No.
It runs by continuous divine direction. It's interesting, even historical polytheists acknowledge this attribute. If you were to ask them who manages the sun, the moon, the seasons, they would invariably reply, God.
Okay, and finally, the essential power and capacity that underpins all of these magnificent actions.
Number 7, power and determination, al-Qawi al-Qadir.
Yeah.
He is the powerful, the strong, capable of all things. He is the Qadir, the capable, and Du al-Quwa al-Mateen, the possessor of strength, the firm. This attribute just confirms that the capacity required to uphold the previous 6.
To create, sustain, own, govern, give, and withhold, all at the same time.
Simultaneously across infinite dimensions, that capacity is singular, it's infinite, and it belongs only to the Lord.
This concept of total rububiyya, the creator, owner, sustainer, controller, it has a massive immediate consequence for the believer, doesn't it? The acceptance of divine decree. How does accepting these 7 attributes fundamentally impact belief in Qadar wa Qadar?
Oh, it's an inseparable link.
Yeah.
It has to. If you accept that God is the sole, singular, comprehensive controller, the Rab, then you must submit to the belief that nothing happens.
Nothing.
Be it benefit, harm, movement, or rest, except by his prior creation, action, and decree. If you believe he is the absolute administrator at Tadbir, you can't logically claim that some negative event happened outside of his will or knowledge. This acceptance of Qadar wa Qadar, or decree, is the psychological and practical consequence of Tawhid al-Rububiyyah. It's what allows a believer to cope with hardship and misfortune, recognizing that everything is measured and determined by an all-powerful, all-wise ruler.
Okay, so if this concept of lordship is so absolute, it raises the question, how is the existence of this sole Lord established? Our sources state this is an almost necessary truth, it's innate, but they also provide wonderfully rich, accessible forms of evidence asserting that the recognition of the Creator is rooted in something called fitra.
That's the starting point. The recognition of the Creator is not meant to be some kind of intellectual struggle. It is rooted in fitra, the original sound disposition upon which every human being is created.
The factory settings, so to speak.
Exactly, the factory settings. Because this knowledge is inherent, the sources argue that extensive intellectual argumentation is often unnecessary. It really only serves as a reminder, unless that innate disposition has been corrupted by outside influences. Nonetheless, God provided four main, powerful categories of proof for those who need reinforcement or clarification.
Let's dedicate some time to the internal evidence first. This is proof one, the innate disposition, fitra. What exactly does this mean for human psychology?
Fitra is like a metaphysical GPS. It's the natural inclination that makes humans inherently receptive to truth. It means the soul is naturally inclined toward loving, recognizing, and prioritizing the Creator, and it's averse to falsehood or polytheism.
So it's not something you learn.
No. The sources state that this knowledge is a necessity of our very creation, much like the necessity of breathing or needing sustenance. You don't learn this truth, you recognize it.
But if it's so innate, why do people deny it? I mean, that's the obvious question.
Right. And the sources explain that the fitra is like a healthy seed, and it's the external environment, the parents, the teachers, the culture that corrupts it. But the most powerful confirmation of this inherent truth is what we can call the crisis test.
Tell us about the crisis test again, because I think this perfectly illustrates how persistent the fitra is.
It's that moment of ultimate distress, when you're faced with imminent, terrifying danger, say you're alone and lost in a storm at sea, or you're facing a sudden catastrophic life event, when all your familiar avenues of help are exhausted. Where does the human mind turn?
Is something higher.
Spontaneously. They appeal to the ultimate, singular, omnipotent power that they inherently know exists. The facade of their formal beliefs, whether it's atheism or polytheism, it just cracks under the weight of existential fear.
They instinctively call out to the singular controller, even if they deny him when they're comfortable.
Precisely. The sources cite verses describing how humans, when they're afflicted by distress at sea, they call exclusively and sincerely upon God. But the moment he delivers them to safety, they forget that sincere devotion, and they revert to associating partners with him. That spontaneous, desperate invocation, which just transcends learned belief, is the fitra asserting itself under duress.
This innate knowledge also provides a strong logical argument for the entire prophetic mission, doesn't it?
It does. It's the primacy of worship. Think about it. If the existence of the Creator was unknown, the first message of every prophet would have been, "Hey everyone, I am here to prove to you that a Creator exists."
Right, that would be step one.
But their central primary invitation was always to worship God alone, uluhiyya. This demonstrates that the existence of the Creator, al-Rububiyya, was already an accepted, inherent truth rooted in the fitra, and the prophet's mission was to remind humanity of the necessary consequence of that truth, which is exclusive devotion.
Okay, so moving from the internal to the external, what about evidence that we can see and verify with our own senses? This is proof two, sensory evidence, al-his.
Sensory evidence refers to the direct, observable intervention of the divine in the physical world. And the most common and powerful example is the reality of answered prayers and supplications that lead to tangible, immediate results. Or, the miraculous signs granted to the prophets.
And the sources offer a very specific and vivid anecdote here, one that demonstrates an instantaneous observable response.
It's a remarkable story that really removes all doubt about a responsive controller. During a time of severe drought, the prophet was giving his Friday sermon. A Bedouin who was just desperate because his livelihood was perishing, he bursts into the mosque and calls upon the prophet to pray for rain.
Okay.
The companion Anas narrated that before the Bedouin even spoke, the sky was completely clear, not a cloud. Immediately, while the prophet was still standing on the pulpit, a cloud formed like a shield right over the city. It thundered, and it burst into an intense downpour.
So the change was immediate, observable, and directly linked to the supplication.
It was a visible, tangible response.
Mm-hmm.
Hiss. And the story continues that the rain was so heavy it just poured until the following Friday. When the Bedouin returned, he complained that the rain was now too much and they needed it to stop.
You can't please everyone.
Right. And the prophet smiled. He supplicated for the clouds to disperse around the city, and the clouds parted immediately, creating a clear sky over Medina, while the surrounding areas continued to get rain. This simultaneous control over the elements is cited as undeniable sensory proof of an all-hearing, all-controlling Lord.
That's incredible. Okay, next we have the structural evidence, proof three, cosmic and intrinsic signs, al-afaq wal-anfis, which combines the vastness of the universe with the complexity of the self. Let's focus first on the afaq, the cosmic order.
Al-afaq is the observation of the detailed, precise, and systematic regulation of the macro-universe. Think of the heavens, the stars, the perfect mathematical cycle of the sun and moon, the consistent pattern of night and day. the flow of rivers, the mechanics that allow ships to sail. This sheer, stable order, maintained over millennia without friction or decay, it necessitates a regulator. The system is just too perfect, too integrated to be the result of chaos.
And here we find that famous intuitive deduction of the Arabi, the Bedouin, which is so often contrasted with all that philosophical complexity.
Yes, it's a beautiful example of sound, uncorrupted intellect. When the Bedouin was asked how he knew his Lord, he didn't launch into metaphysics. He just said, the track implies the traveler, and the dropping implies the camel. So the sky with its constellations, the earth with its valleys, and the sea with its waves, do they not imply the all-hearing, all-seeing?
It's just simple cause and effect applied to the grandest scale.
That's it. A footprint implies a passerby. An orderly universe implies an orderer.
And the internal half, al-anfus, the signs within ourselves.
This is the argument from introspection. Looking into human creation itself is cited as irrefutable proof. We move from a single drop of fluid through all these various stages of gestation and development, and the result is a fully functioning human being with complex cognitive abilities, organs, consciousness.
We have no control over that process.
An individual has zero power to initiate or direct this process. The transformation from an insignificant substance into a creature of such detailed power and wisdom reveals the immense knowledge and capability of the Creator.
Finally, we turn to formal reasoning. Proof 4. Intellectual evidence, ala koshal. What is the simplest, most inescapable intellectual argument here?
Reason dictates that complex, integrated phenomena cannot come into being by pure chance, nor can they create themselves. The fundamental question is, how did it all begin? Were all these things created from nothing, or were they their own creators? The intellectual argument rests on the impossibility of two concepts: creation from absolute nothing, which is impossible because nothing can produce something, and self-creation.
Which is logically absurd. A thing has to exist before it can act as its own creator.
Exactly. And since both are absurd, the only remaining intellectual possibility is that an external, pre-existing creator brought it all into being. And the sources provided that friendship analogy to illustrate this logical endpoint.
Ah, yes. The story of Abu Hanifa.
Right. He used this analogy when challenging the Sumnia. He delayed the debate, claiming he had an issue. When he finally arrived, he apologized, saying he had just witnessed an incredible sight. A vast cargo ship, fully laden with goods, sailed across the high seas, navigated itself, docked, unloaded its cargo, and returned across the ocean.
All without a captain, crew, or anyone considering it?
Exactly. The Sumnia immediately called this insane and impossible, and Abu Hanifa then used that moment to ask them, if a simple ship requires a captain and crew to administer its affairs, how is it possible to claim that the entire, infinitely more complex cosmos, with its stars, oceans, and life systems, manages itself without a creator or administrator? The logic is just inescapable.
Okay, so we've established that the evidence for the soul, absolute Lord for Rububiyya, is manifold. It's innate, it's sensory, it's cosmic, and it's intellectual. It seems irrefutable. But here is the critical point that shifts our entire deep dive. Our sources make it unequivocally clear that simply agreeing that God is the creator, the sustainer, the controller, that does not constitute true faith. Wait, if I agree, he created the universe and runs it, why is that insufficient? Where does that initial belief break down?
That is the central paradox and the core theological failure identified throughout human history. The breakdown occurs in the transition from knowledge to action. Rububiyya is knowledge, knowing God as the owner, creator, and controller. The failure is the subsequent refusal to implement uluhiyya, the required consequence of that knowledge.
So Rububiyya is the foundation.
It's the necessary foundation, but uluhiyya is the indispensable superstructure that you have to build on top of it.
Let's properly define uluhiyya then. If Rab is the owner and controller, what is Ilah, the deity?
Linguistically, Ilah means the one who is worshipped, the one to whom the heart turns in love, veneration, reliance, and refuge. So uluhiyya is the realization that the owner, creator, sustainer, and commander of all existence, the one who possesses all those characteristics of Rububiyya, is the only one deserving of all forms of worship.
Total devotion.
Total. Prayer, supplication, sacrifice, absolute hope, absolute fear, and absolute obedience.
This means the historical mistake of the polytheists, the mushrikun, wasn't about creation. It was solely about dedication.
Absolutely. The sources confirm this using overwhelming scriptural and historical proofs. The pre-Islamic polytheists fully acknowledged God's Rububiyya. When you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, who provided provision, or who caused life and death, they would readily reply, God. They knew who the supreme controller was.
So their error wasn't ignorance of the creator, but confusion about who deserved devotion. It's like they acknowledged the supreme boss, but then dedicated their rituals and requests to lesser intermediate figures.
That is the perfect analogy. Their fatal flaw was committing shirk polytheism, or associating partners in uluhiyya. They took partners, intermediates, or intercessors, statues, idols, holy figures, saints, jinn, deceased prophets, and they dedicated acts of worship to them. But crucially, they did not believe these intermediaries could create, harm, or benefit independently.
So they didn't believe the idol created the rain. They believed the idol could somehow lobby the creator for them.
Exactly. They used the partners as a means to an end. As confirmed in the source material, those taking protectors explicitly said, "We only worship them so that they may bring us nearer to God in proximity." Zulfa. They acknowledged God's unique power of Rububiyya creation and control, but failed to reserve the necessary and exclusive consequence devotion for Him alone.
The sources cite two key verses that just nail this distinction, don't they?
They do. The first is Lukeman, verse 25. If you ask them who created the heavens and the earth, they will surely say God, say praise be to God, but most of them do not know. This confirms their acknowledgement of the Creator. And the second is the profound verse in Yusuf, verse 106, which explains the subtlety of their error. And most of them only believe in God while associating partners with Him. This means they affirm the existence of the Creator, a partial belief in Rububiyya, but they vitiated that belief by directing devotion elsewhere. That's shirk in uluhiyya.
That makes the connection just inseparable.
Yeah.
The one who performs those 7 acts of lordship is the only one worthy of worship.
It is the ultimate logical deduction. Rububiyya is the undeniable premise, and uluhiyya is the inescapable conclusion. The one who sustains your life, controls your death, directs your fortune, and owns the heavens and the earth is the only rational recipient of your prayer, your hope, and your devotion.
And this is why the prophets were sent.
This is why. They were sent primarily to establish Tawhid al-Uluhiyya, the exclusive worship of God alone, because the fundamental recognition of Rububiyya was already largely, though sometimes dimly, accepted by humanity's innate disposition.
The consequence is stark then. Philosophical or intellectual acknowledgement of creation and control is never sufficient. It has to be paired with exclusive, sincere devotion. If not, the individual has failed to submit to the ultimate requirement of the Lord they already recognize.
Okay, so given the strength of the 4 proofs we discussed, especially the innate disposition, the sensory evidence, and, the simple logic of the Bedouin, it seems utterly unnecessary to create complex, esoteric arguments for the Creator's existence.
Right.
Why, then, did certain theological schools create these highly complex philosophical proofs?
This brings us to a crucial historical critique found in the sources, and it's focused on the Mutakallimin, the scholars of speculative theology. Starting in the Abbasid era, these scholars felt compelled to defend theological tenets against the influx of sophisticated Hellenistic or Greek philosophy.
So they were fighting fire with fire.
That was the idea. They adopted some of those same philosophical premises and methods to prove the Creator's existence. They moved away from the intuitive proofs of the prophets. And their signature, highly complex method was known as the accidents and bodies argument. For you, the learner, we need to break this down slowly. What are the philosophical premises of this proof?
Let's simplify the terms first. In this philosophy, bodies are all physical objects, and accidents are temporary qualities that exist within those bodies. Things like movement, stillness, color, taste, sound, smell. The Mutakallimin argued based on the premise of atomism. Everything is composed of minute, indivisible parts that constantly receive and lose these temporary accidents.
So a body is the substance and an accident is its constantly changing state.
Exactly. Now here's the core premise of their argument. They asserted that these temporary qualities, these accidents, are constantly changing and therefore they are newly created, or hadith, at every single instant. They appear and disappear.
Right.
Since a body cannot exist without these accidents and the accidents are always new and temporal, the body they inhabit must also be newly created. It must have a beginning. It is not eternal.
Wait, hadith, that is a term we know from prophetic tradition. Is there a distinction here?
Excellent point. Yes, the Arabic term hadith in this philosophical context means newly brought into existence or temporal, having a beginning after non-existence. This is totally distinct from the term hadith used for the narratives of the prophet.
Okay.
So the Mutakallimin argue that because the entire world, all bodies and accidents are newly created, or hadith, they must, by logical necessity, have a creator or originator who brought them into being.
That sounds incredibly convoluted. I mean, it requires the listener to accept an entire philosophical framework about atoms and accidents, just to arrive at a conclusion that the Bedouin reached simply by observing a camel track.
That is the essence of the scholarly critique. The sources, quoting figures like Ibn Taymiyyah and al-Ghazali, criticize this method severely. It is deemed complex, tortuous, derived from foreign philosophical traditions, so not from the prophets or their immediate successors, and unnecessarily difficult for the layperson.
And there was a famous description of it.
Yes, al-Ghazali, who was himself deeply involved in philosophy, described the method as maybe necessary for scholars but difficult for the masses. But later scholars were far more critical, memorably describing it as the flesh of a lean camel on the peak of a rugged mountain,
Meaning what?
signifying extreme difficulty for a minimal, already available spiritual reward. A lot of work for not much new gain.
I understand the critique of complexity, but the Mutakallimun attempted to use the story of Prophet Abraham to claim scriptural validity for this kind of subtle reasoning, didn't they?
They did, and the sources explicitly refute this interpretation. The Mutakallimun claimed that when Abraham was debating his people and said, "I do not love the setting ones," he was referring to the stars movement, or change of accident, which proved the star's temporality and
Yeah.
therefore its need for a creator.
But the sources maintain that Abraham's argument was directed at devotion, not existence.
Precisely. Abraham was using the celestial body's disappearance, it's a fool, to refute their suitability for worship, for uluhiyah, not its change of state to prove its creation, or rububiyah. His point was theological. The one worthy of absolute devotion should not be able to hide, disappear, or fail to control its own presence.
Of course.
If a celestial body can't even guarantee its own visibility, how can it be worthy of being revered, supplicated, or worshipped? His argument was simple, profound, and directly aimed at the error of polytheism in worship.
So, the Mutakallimun made two major errors. The first was using a flawed, complicated method. What was the second, more dangerous error regarding the nature of faith itself?
The second, far greater error was their assertion regarding the primary obligation of the believer. They argued that the first obligation on every responsible person was to perform this complex intellectual speculation, this al-nazar, to philosophically prove God's existence using their method of accidents and bodies.
They essentially made philosophical expertise a prerequisite for the validity of one's faith.
Yes. They declared that anyone who simply accepted the faith through the evidence of the prophets and the innate disposition, without undertaking this rigorous philosophical proof, so the laymen, the common people, the masses, were either non-believers, imperfect believers, or at least dangerously negligent. They imposed an intellectual barrier where none existed in scripture or prophetic practice.
That is a fundamental restriction on the accessibility of faith. How did the overwhelming consensus of mainstream scholars rebut this claim?
The sources confirm the overwhelming consensus of the early scholars, the Salaf and Aima, that this view is fundamentally wrong and contradicts both reason and scripture. They point out the absurd implication. If this speculation was the first obligation, then the companions and the first generations of Muslims who simply accepted the message of the prophets would have been considered non-believers.
That's a huge claim.
Which is why it was declared the greatest form of disbelief by the consensus of Muslims, because it invalidates the faith of the vast majority of believers throughout history.
So, if the first obligation isn't complex intellectual speculation, what is the clear, historically agreed upon first obligation required of a person entering the faith?
The sources state it very clearly, based on the historical practice of the prophets and their followers. The first thing required of a person entering the faith is the Shahadatain, the twin declarations of faith.
The call is to submit.
The call is immediately to submit and worship. The instructions given to the early envoys like Mu'adh and Ali were always to call people to this declaration first. This practical precedent confirms that the fundamental recognition of the Creator, Rububiyah, is already established in the heart, in the fitra, and the immediate call is to submit to Him in uluhiyah. The road to belief is intuitive and accessible, not complex and philosophical.
Yeah.
Hashtag Hag Outro, host speaker and expert speaker.
This deep dive has, I think, stripped the foundation of belief down to its essentials. We started by breaking down the profound linguistic layers of al-Rab, the exclusive owner, the sovereign, and the continuous sustainer. We then defined the total scope of monotheism of lordship, Rububiyah, through those 7 exclusive divine attributes, and we linked that acceptance directly to the necessity of believing in divine decree.
And we established that vital theological equation. Acknowledging the Creator's existence and control, Rububiyya, is necessary, but it is only the gateway. The ultimate purpose is the natural consequence, submitting all worship exclusively to Him, Uluhiyya.
And we saw that those who sought to complicate this process with philosophical proofs were severely critiqued.
They were, because they unnecessarily burdened humanity with a task that was already fulfilled by the innate design of the soul and the clarity of the cosmic signs.
It's clear that the recognition of the Lord is not something you have to argue yourself into with syllogisms, but something that is woven into the very fabric of your being, requiring only a moment of sincerity to recognize.
And that innate design, the fitra, that leads us to a final provocative thought. Our sources indicate that every single newborn is created on that sound, innate disposition, and it is only external factors, the environment, the parents, the corrupting influence of society, that cause them to deviate.
Think about that.
Consider that this fundamental recognition of lordship is inherently built in. It's a prerequisite for our very existence. What does it imply about the immense psychological and societal effort required to suppress something so fundamental to the human core?
Yeah.
Think about how much force, how much distraction, and how much sustained ideological effort is needed to truly change, confuse, or deny what you were initially created to recognize and affirm. That original truth must be overwhelmingly powerful to require such constant, sustained suppression.
A profound thought on the resilience of the innate truth. We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.